This is the history of Spider-Man.
Okay.
And I get intimidated to talk about comic book history because I'm not an expert at all. And
we
there are
didn't
a lot
invite
of-
one,
There are
apparently.
a lot of vultures on the internet.
Oh, I'll protect you, Mary Jane.
But Spider-Man was created, first debuted in Amazing Fantasy 15 in August 1962, credited to Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. The Amazing Spider-Man, his comic book series, started in March of 1963. And now apparently Jack Kirby, the Marvel illustrator, came up with the idea of a spider-themed hero, and Stan Lee's like, yeah, let's see what you got. And he didn't like his drawings. So they pushed it over to Steve Ditko, who came up with the costume, the powers, and the character's backstory. So basically he created Spider-Man, but Stan Lee put his name on it.
He liked to do that.
That's a recurring thing with these guys because Stan Lee was management, and he had the
His
authority.
name's easier. It's shorter. This
That's
just
true.
saves time. Stanley.
That's true. Like I always until I learned how they actually wrote the comic books, which is like Stan Lee's like, it'll be like Spider-Man fights the chameleon. And then the artist goes and draws every single panel and then hands it back to Stan Lee. He's like, okay. And then he just writes word bubbles, basically. And it's like, well, the other guy's the one who actually wrote it, but okay.
All right. Yeah, he's doing all the emotion and telling you what the vibes are, and you're just going, now, see?
Yeah.
Let go of that string.
Not that he didn't do any, like he was very key. He just took all of the credit, and like Steve Ditko died without, it's unclear if he even got royalties, but he basically created this character who's made tens of billions of dollars and just got paid a salary to do it.
Gig economy, man.
Yes. Now, the long history of Spider-Man movies, and this is a fascinating story.
Oh, well.
And I'm afraid I'm going to lose Lacey while talking about this.
I'm preparing for fascination.
Okay. So I'm relying here on
There's one particular one I know of that will probably be very wild, Lacey.
It's got to do with farts or boobs. He knows me. All right, let's go. Give it up.
All right, so this book I'm relying on is called The Big Picture by Ben Fritz, and it's a great book from 2018 about the movie industry basically in the 2010s, and it's really been influential in the way I think about the movie industry, but it uses Sony Pictures as sort of a guide and their evolving use of the Spider-Man, stewardship of the Spider-Man franchise. But Spider-Man, there was a very long journey to get him on the big screen, and it involves all these different companies who make really strange and confusing deals with each other, and then companies will go bankrupt, and it's unclear who owns what. But Marvel Comics, which was always in financial trouble, basically after the 60s, it just never made money. It only made money by licensing deals. And this guy, Menahem Golan, who had previously been the head of Canon Films, which produced Superman 4 and this famous never-released Fantastic Four movie, he was the king of super low budget bullshit. And he, for $250,000, purchased the film license for Spider-Man, and then his financing never came together, but he, due to weird complications, always held the rights to the Spider-Man movies. Eventually, the home video rights went to Columbia Pictures, aka Sony Pictures, and James Cameron got hired, got paid $2 million to write a script for a $50 million Spider-Man movie that eventually he would direct.
Get this.
But then
he's under the water.
Yeah, it's mostly underwater.
It's perfect.
Eventually, though, the company that was doing all of that, it had its own financial issues, and so the Marvel, meanwhile, is filing for bankruptcy in 1996, and Sony Pictures puts together a $500 million offer to buy the entire company. They'd be able to make movies out of every character except for the Hulk, who was licensed to Universal. But Marvel ultimately ended up selling not to Sony, but to this guy, Ike Perlmutter, and his company, Toy Biz, who were the toy company that made Marvel's toys.
Okay.
Because they made the pitch that Marvel is sitting on a gold mine of properties that it can sell to movie studios. That the $500 million offer Sony just made us is going to be dwarfed in the coming years when we sell the rights to our characters to movie studios. Which was correct. Mm-hmm. So they end up with it. But Sony goes back to Marvel and to license Spider-Man. Basically, Marvel owns Spider-Man, but we, Sony, have the right to make movies out of Spider-Man, the character. And they offer, and Marvel counteroffers and says, you can have the rights to all of our characters for $25 million. all of our characters. Okay, so this is from the book. So Yair Landau is Sony's executive who's negotiating the deal. And this is from the big picture quote. Landau brought the offer back to the heads of Sony's motion picture business, and it didn't take long for them to quickly and decisively respond. No way. Nobody gives a shit about any of the other Marvel characters. We don't want to do that deal. As if he were Jack coming home with a handful of magic beans. Their instructions to Landau were quite simple. Go back and make a deal for only Spider-Man. It was the mistake of a lifetime, a deal that could have made Sony billions of dollars and potentially turned it into the juggernaut that Marvel's current owner, Disney, is today. Because they went back and said, no, we only want Spider-Man. We'll buy him for $20 million. So for an additional $5 million, they could have had all of Marvel's characters.
There's a part of it that's like, I don't think this actually, if they had bought it all, they would have been able to turn it into as big of a franchise as what Disney has. Just because Sony has such a terrible reputation for superhero movies.
Well, at the time, I mean, they're the ones who made the Spider-Man movies. So it's kind of they kind of set out the blueprint. But I don't think it would have been as big. But you know, all the dominoes that fall because of this, because of all these characters going to other studios, it wouldn't happen the same way. But it's just so funny that they're like, nobody gives a shit about Iron Man or Captain America or whoever. Just get us Spider-Man. So they get Spider-Man. And they make this movie, this 2002 movie, and it's a huge, huge hit. And Marvel makes royalties from it, and they have merchandising rights, and that makes them a lot of money. But Ike Perlmutter, this famous piece of shit who owns Marvel at the time, he is very bitter because it's the oldest business story in the world. Someone else is making money with my stuff. I should be making money with my stuff. And this is the thought that eventually leads to them starting their own studio.
Perlmutter Studios?
Marvel Studios.
Oh.
So Marvel and Sony, they sue each other because they're always arguing about who gets what percentage of what. But meanwhile, Sony produces Spider-Man 2, which is a big hit, but it's less profitable because with each Spider-Man movie they make, the quotes for Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi go up and they get profit participation. So hang on to that detail because I'm
hanging on to it.
It's very key to understanding what's happening in the movie business right now with the pivot to streaming.
How's Kirsten's money going up at all?
It's also, she's doing good.
Good job.
So they make a new deal where Marvel gets 75% of Spider-Man merchandise royalties and Sony gets 25%. But
you didn't make a chart for me?
No.
Some sort of infographic?
But key to this, because Marvel is relying on Sony to make Spider-Man movies to reinvigorate the Spider-Man toy line. Mm-hmm. There's a clause. You have to make a Spider-Man movie at least every 5 years. If you don't, you lose the rights to the character.
Right.
And this puts Sony in a bind because after Spider-Man 3, they have to put a new movie in production, but Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire don't necessarily want to come back. And even if they do, their deals are going to escalate even further and Sony's going to make even less money on a new movie. So what do, Lacey? They make the same decision that lots of studios have made since then, which is it doesn't matter who plays the hero or who directs it. It's the character that sells the thing. So we'll just scrap it all and start over again and essentially remake the 2002 Spider-Man movie, this time with a different actor and with a different director.
Who was it?
It was Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man.
Oh, gosh, such a black hole. I do not have any acknowledge. Nope. He doesn't exist.
Yeah, I watched it to prepare for this. I'd seen it a few times. It is vapor. It evaporates the second you're done watching it.
I can't even picture his face, his stupid little face.
Do you like these movies, John? The Amazing Spider-Man movies?
They're not amazing, but I do like them. I think Andrew Garfield has a fantastic personality for Spider-Man, and that's the biggest thing that makes them as good as they are.
Who plays?
She's not actually in them.
Oh,
Emma Stone plays Gwen Stacy, and they're good, and they're very good together.
I'd fuck with that.
A lot of Spider-Man fans hate Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I actually enjoyed it when I watched it.
You would have been the right age for it, though, too, right? These would have been hitting you at a better time than these first three, because you're so much younger than us.
But these movies, they don't make as much money. They're not as received as well. And meanwhile, Marvel has started up the MCU, and it's the biggest thing in the world. And Sony's like, why aren't we as big as them? It doesn't make any sense. And I think the reason I told this entire story is because I think that a big part of the pivot to streaming was to avoid situations like Sony had with Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire, where it's like, we don't want the people who make the movies to know how valuable they are to us. If you make a movie for streaming, nobody knows how many people watch it, how successful it is, and therefore your directors and stars can't negotiate. They won't have any leverage.
There's not data? How?
The companies have the data. They don't share it. They're not required to share it.
Up.
Box office figures, because the movies, the movie theaters are not owned by the studios. So that's like public. You have separation, and therefore you have like this sort of accountability structure where you can learn how much money.
Are you about to start talking about box chain? Because if you are,
blockchain.
Yeah.
No.
I'll get the fuck out of here. Okay. All right. Box chain.
But so to Sony, they're like, we're making these Spider-Man movies. They're very successful, but we get less profit each time, and that's infuriating. We'd rather make less money but keep more of it, which is why they do Amazing Spider-Man, and also they have to make another Spider-Man movie, or else they lose the rights to the character.
Can they do the thing where they make an entire movie and then don't release it? Can they do that?
No, you have to release it, because the point is, for Marvel, it's about toy sales.
Could they do an animated movie if they wanted?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Good question.
Glad we talked about this.
Anyway, they hire Sam Raimi to make this movie, to make the 2002 Spider-Man movie. And he grew up in Michigan. He was an aspiring, like Steven Spielberg, he was an aspiring filmmaker, made his own movies when he was a high school student with his friends. But one of his friends was Bruce Campbell, who he made this short film called Within the Woods in 1978. And eventually, they raised, by harassing their friends and family and local businesses, they raised enough money to produce this movie, The Evil Dead, in 1981.
That's
and it
amazing.
became this slow sleeper hit, eventually grossed several $1 million. And this kick-started Raimi's career. He made a movie called Crime Wave, written by his friends, the Coen brothers. Then he made Evil Dead 2.
Could you imagine that being your first and then third movie?
Yeah, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess it's more amazing in retrospect due to, like, I know the cult following, but I don't know what it felt like in the moment. But that's your first fucking movie. That's pretty damn good.
Well, yeah, everybody who sets out to make an independent movies is like, this is gonna be our Evil Dead, and we just never hear about it.
No, because it's not.
Yeah, and you just happen to be friends with the guy, with Bruce Campbell, who is the reason those movies is one of the reasons those movies work. But he makes a movie called Darkman, which is interesting because it's kind of Spider-Man is kind of a remake of Darkman.
I remember this movie.
Army of Darkness, Quick and the Dead, The Simple Plan, and then Spider-Man was like his breakthrough commercial hit. It was kind of an unusual choice to take this sort of weirdo horror director with a very specific style and give him the keys. But this movie feels like a Sam Raimi movie to me. It's like the ideal, like he plays within the sandbox of Spider-Man, but it has his personality all over it.
What are his traits?
Really, really frantic, frenetic camera. Very, very fun editing choices. I'll point them out as we go.
All right.
Real quick, there are two canceled Spider-Man movies. I think it's bring up one on since it's Lacey. I know you like Leonardo DiCaprio a lot.
Indeed,
he was actually supposed to be Spider-Man, and in the James Cameron version that never ended up happening. That film was going to be R-rated.
What? He would have been wet the whole time, scribbling in a little notepad.
He would have been so wet, yeah.
And also in the 90s, he's Michael Jackson tried to buy Spider-Man and make a film,
I forgot about that.
where he stars in it.
You can't let him be able to get into Windows. You can't do it.
Oh, yeah.
No. Your friendly neighborhood peeping Tom.
He was always inserting himself into things. He thought he was going to be in Star Wars Episode 1.
Stop it.
Yeah, he like showed up to set and he's like,
stop it.
I'm here.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
You're pulling my leg.